Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph and we will be learning today Miras Hashem Daf Pei Vav Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn the halachas that apply to Kaddish. Kaddish, such a beautiful tefillah that unfortunately I think it's very undervalued. Such an absolutely beautiful tefillah. We saw that it was a tefillah that was Niskan al Yidei, the Anshe Knesset Agdola, following the Churban Bayis Rishon. It's a way to cry out to the Rebbeinu Shalom to restore the Kvod Shamayim and bring back a Beis Hamikdash. We have a chiyuv to hear Kaddish 7 times a day, and it's something that it behooves us to pay a little bit closer attention to Kaddish, to saying Amen Yehesh Pei Rabbah, to paying attention to the words of the Kaddish when we say Amen. In any case, we're here on the bottom of Pei Hey Amud Beis. We began Siman Nun Hey last time, and we are up to the very bottom of Pei Hey Amud Beis in the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Daled. The Mechaber had told us that in order to say Kaddish, Ein Omer Moisai B'Pachas Me'asara Zecharim, we can't recite Kaddish unless we have 10 males, B'nei Chayrin, they cannot be Avadim, and Gedolim, they have to be adults, Shehiviu, Shtei Sairos, who have already physically matured. They have the signs of physical maturity. They have already grown 2 pubic hairs. Hevi Shtei Sairos. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Daled. Ayin Pri Chodesh Siman Samach Tes, Shekara Irar al HaMekayme Shenayagin, the Pri Chodesh complains about places that have the minig, Sha'Katan Omer Kaddish Ubaruchu, where they allow a katan, they allow a minor to say Kaddish. This is the Kaddish after Yishtabach, Ubaruchu, and to say Baruchu, V'hakahal Einim Acharav, and the Kehillah answers to the Kaddish and to the Baruchu of the katan. And the Pri Chodesh says, Dishaloi Kedin Heim Oisim, this is improper. Now, right away, I just want to point out Dirshu footnote number 11. Dirshu footnote 11. Find the right page here. Dirshu footnote 11. He says that's talking about the Kaddish that the Shlich Tzibur, the one who davens for the Amud, would normally recite, let's say after Yishtabach. Omnam le'inyin Kaddish achar Aleinu, but when it comes to a Kaddish Yasaim, like the Kaddish after Aleinu, Kasav Lekaman, we're going to see brought down later on in Siman Kuf Lamed Beis, Shetiknu Lahaniach Kaddish Zel Yasaimim Ketanim. That Kaddish Yasaim after Aleinu was specifically set aside for Ketanim, who are Yasaimim, to say Kaddish, since they cannot serve as Shluchei Tzibur. We already saw earlier in the Mishnah Berurah that really when somebody is a chiv to daven for the Amud, the davening for the Amud is a greater schus for the nifter than the saying of Kaddish. But when we have Ketanim, they can't daven, they can't be Shluchei Tzibur, they can't say the regular Kadeshim, the Chatzi Kaddish, the Kaddish Shalem, in davening as a Shluchei Tzibur, so therefore we set aside for them the Kaddish Yasam after Aleinu. Continues the Mishnah Berurah here, and he says, Va'afilu im yesh asara anoshim gedolim chutz mimenu. A katan should not serve as the Shliach Tzibur, and he should not say Kaddish, even if there are 10 people making a minyan without him. V'ayin b'Pri Megadim sham shemitzadid gam ken lahachmer bazel lechatchila. The Pri Megadim agrees with the Pri Chodesh to be machmir that a katan should not serve as the Shliach Tzibur to say Kaddish or Baruchu. Kasav ba'alachis k'tanoi simen memches k'sheshtayim oy shloisha oimrim Kaddish yachad. This is something that happens in shuls all the time, and people don't know what to do. Says the halachas k'tanois, if you have multiple people saying Kaddish at the same time, but they're a little bit off, ve'echad makdim, one is going a little bit faster than the other one. So it's Yiskadav, Yiskadav, Shemei Rabbah, and then 2 seats down you hear Yiskadav, Yiskadav, Shemei Rabbah. So they're a little bit off. Says the Mishnah Berurah, what do? Im Bayim Kal Echad Toich Kedei Dibur. If they're each going to hit the Amen, B'Toich Kedei Dibur of the other one. So they're all very, very close. It's not Yiskadav, Yiskadav, Shemei Rabbah, Yiskadav, Yiskadav, Shemei, it's Yiskadav, Yiskadav, Shemei Rabbah, Shemei Rabbah. So it's toich kedei dibur. It's within the amount of time that it takes to say Shalom Alecha Rabbi Yomeiri. So it's there's a little bit of a gap, but it's not too great of a pause. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah, Yana im harishain, you could answer to the first one, oy im ha'achrain, or to the last one, amen. You answer amen once, and very interesting. He says it doesn't matter if it's to the first one or to the last one. V'yala lekulam, and that one amen will suffice to cover all the people that are saying Kaddish, even though they're not answering, they're not reaching amen all at the same exact point. Now, what's fascinating to me is I would have thought if it would have said, answer the last one, and that will cover even the first one. So I could hear, you heard the first one, you didn't answer yet, you answered to the second one, you covered both. That's not what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Mishnah Berurah says you can even answer the first one. And even answering the first one covers the ones that didn't finish yet, since they're toich kedei dibur of the first one. V'em yesh hefsik, but if there is a pause greater than toich kedei dibur between the various kedeshim, yanal kol echad ve'echad, then you should answer to each one. Now we have a fascinating Mishnah Berurah. Adam hanoitzer al yedei sefer yitzira. You know, this is Shaila. I look, the Chavetz Chaim decided that this was something that he had to put into the Mishnah Berurah. Adam hanoitzer al yedei sefer yitzira. If people went ahead and they created a humanoid using the sefer yitzira, they created a fully animated humanoid somehow using the sefer yitzira. Im mitztaref la'asara u'chol davar shebekdusha. Does he count towards a minyan? I am B'tshuvas Chacham Tzvi, Siman Tzadik Gimel, U'b'sefer Ikrei Dinim, Masha Kosav B'inyan Zeh. Says the Chavetz Chaim, if you have this shaila, you know, if you and your friends got together and you created a humanoid using the sefer yitzira, and now you want to know if he's covered, if he is at center for a minyan, he tells you the Mar Mekaymes where to look. Dirshu footnote number 13 brings down over here, She'estafek pozeh u'pasak she'enu mitztaref leminyan. If you look at the Mar Mekaymes set forth by the Mishnah Berurah, they question this and they reach a conclusion that no, this Sefer Yitzira person does not count for a minyan. Chazon Ish Kasav, the Chazon Ish also tackled this, and the Chazon Ish writes, Shenir she'ein lo shum zechuyah shel Yisrael. He's not considered a Yid at all. V'karoi v'adavar shegam ein lo zechuyah shel Adam. He doesn't even count as a mensch. I don't know what this means. This is beyond my pay grade, but I do find it fascinating that the Chavetz Chaim felt that this was something that he had to put into the Mishnah Berurah. Okay. Now, let's take a look at the top line of the Mechaber here, Pei Vav Amud Aleph. The Sif Aleph opened up with Kaddish. The Mechaber was specifically addressing the recital of Kaddish. Oimrim Kaddish. We say Kaddish, and again, in the order of the Shulchan Aruch, we are up to the point in davening where it's time for the Kaddish after Yishtabach. Chatzi Kaddish after Yishtabach before Baruch Hu. And on that, the Mechaber said, Oimrim Kaddish, we say Kaddish, and you need a minyan to say Kaddish. Now, on the top of Pei Vav Amud Aleph, the Mechaber continues and he says, V'hu adin likdusha. This is also true for Kedusha, you need a minyan. Baruch Hu, and for Baruch Hu you need a minyan. She'ein ne'emarin b'pachos me'asara. None of these things can be said without 10. And we saw in the previous year, this is because we need v'nikdashti. We have the pasuk v'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael, and we have the Gzeira Shava toich toich. It says by the Meraglim hibadalu mitoich ha'eda hazois. So it says v'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael. And then it says hibadlu mitoich ha'eda hara hazois by the Meraglim. And then it says by the Meraglim, who was the Eda? So the Eda were the 10 representatives of the Shvatim without Yehoshua and Kalev. Each Shevet was represented with the Meraglim, but Yehoshua and Kalev were not part of the Meraglim. They did not go wrong like the Meraglim did. So the Eda Hara are the other 10. So an Eda is 10, and then we have the Gzeira Shava Toich Toich to tell me that V'nikdashti b'soich b'nei Yisrael, Every davar shebekdusha requires an Eda of 10. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut in half. V'hu adin l'kedusha. V'hu adin l'chol chazaras hashatz shetzar chasara. The Chavetz Chaim points out, it's not just that for kedusha you need a minyan. For chazaras hashatz you need a minyan. The mikri davar shebekdusha, because chazaras hashatz is called a davar shebekdusha mipnei hakedusha sheyesh ba. Since you recite kedusha as part of chazaras hashatz, that kedusha makes the entire chazaras hashatz a davar shebekdusha that requires a minyan. And this is brought down from the Gemara Megillah Chav Gimel Amud Beis, and together with the Ran. Continues the Mishnah Berurah. Ein peichsin mishiva kadesha b'chal yom. Like I mentioned at the outset of the shir, we have a chiyuv to hear 7 kadeshim every day. Ein peichsin mishiva kadesha b'chal yom. I think a lot of people don't look at it that way, that there's a chiyuv of kaddish. There's a chiyuv to hear kaddish 7 times. Keneged sheva b'yom hilal ticha. There is raid whether the chiyuv of Kaddish of 7 times a day is a chiyuv on you, that you have to hear Kaddish and respond to Kaddish 7 times. Is it a chiyuv that the tzibur has to recite Kaddish 7 times? So there is raid on this, but the assumption that we're going to go with seems to be that each individual has a chiyuv to hear and respond to Kaddish a minimum of 7 times a day. So the Mishnah Berurah says here, "Ein pachsim b'shiva kadisha b'chal yom keneged sheva b'yom hilal ticha." This comes from the pasuk in Tehillim where David HaMelech says, "Sheva b'yom hilal ticha." 7 times throughout the day, I praise you. And now the Chavetz Chaim is going to identify the 7 kadeshim. Dahainu, echad achar psuke de zimra. We have 1 chatzi kaddish after yishtabach, after psuke de zimra, shu achar yishtabach. V'sheni, the second one is Chatzi Kaddish Achar Tefillah Shmona Esrei Brachos. We have a Chatzi Kaddish after Chazaras Hashatz, either right after Chazaras Hashatz on a day when there's no Tachnun, or after Tachnun on a day that there's Tachnun. Ushlishi Achar Seder Kedusha. The third Kaddish is the Kaddish Shalem that comes after Uvalut Tzion, that the Chavetz Chaim refers to as Seder Kedusha. Uboy, and in that Kaddish, Oimrim Gamkein Tiskabel Tzaloisain. That's a Kaddish Shalem where we say the line Tiskabel Tzaloisain Uvuusain Dechol Beis Yisrael. We ask the Rabbeinu Shalom that our tefillah, the Tzaloisain, Uvausain, and the requests, Dechol Beis Yisrael of Gans Klal Yisrael, should be niskabel. They should be accepted by the Rabbeinu Shalom. Why do we say that in that Kaddish Shalem? Shehu shaykh gamke l'tefillah shmona esrei. Because it's very interesting. We have 2 Kadeshim that are somewhat connected to Shmona Esrei. We have the Chatzi Kaddish that's after Tachnun, or after Chazaras Hashatz if there is no Tachnun. That is connected to Shmona Esrei. That serves as a separation between Shmona Esrei and what comes next. If you look at davening from 30,000 feet, we have the first section of davening is Psuke de Zimra. When we finish Yishtabach, we mark the end of that section with a Kaddish, with a Chatzi Kaddish. That's the end of one section, and we're going into the next section. Then we have Birchas Kriya Shema. We can't have a separation between Birchas Kriya Shema and Shmona Esrei because we have to be Masmich Geula L'Tfila. We have to say Baruch Atah Hashem Gal Yisrael and go straight into Shmona Esrei. But when we finish Chazaras Hashatz, we have a Chatzi Kaddish to end, to kind of mark off, to demarcate that section. We just finished the section of Tefillah. Then we have the Seder Kedusha, and then we have Kaddish Shalem, and the Kaddish Shalem goes back even on the Shmona Esrei. Even though we marked off the end of a section with Chatzi Kaddish, still in all, we still say a Kaddish Shalem after the Seder HaAvodah, that's the Uvalut Tzion. Uvalut Tzion is considered an extension of Chazaras Hashatz and the Kedusha that's in Chazaras Hashatz. So it's appropriate to say Kaddish Shalem after Uvalut Tzion with Tiskabel Tzaloisain. So that's 3 Kadeshim so far. Urevi, the 4th Kaddish, says the Mishnah Berurah, is Achar Aleinu, a Kaddish Yasam after Aleinu, Sheyesh by Amiras Psukim. It's appropriate to say Kaddish after Aleinu because Aleinu is comprised of Psukim from Tanakh. V'chamishi, the fifth Kaddish of the day, Achar Ashrei b'mincha, is after we say Ashrei by mincha. V'shishi, the sixth one is Akat Tfilas mincha, a Kaddish Shalom with Tiskabel after the Shemona Esrei of mincha, the Chazar Sashatz of mincha. Shvi, the seventh Kaddish is Achar Kriya Shema Shal Arvis, Kodim Tfilas Shemona Esrei. We have a Chatzi Kaddish after Birchas Kriya Shema of Ma'ariv, before Shemona Esrei. Now you'll say, L'chard is an eighth. The Kaddish Achar Tfilas Arvis. You have the Kaddish Shalom after the Shtil Shemona Esrei of Ma'ariv. So the Mishnah Berurah says, after Gam Kein Mitzvah, even though that Kaddish is certainly a mitzvah, Loi Kachashvinan B'chalal Elu Hashiva, we don't count it as one of the seven of Chiyuv, Ayin Sham B'Lavush Hatam. He tells you could look at the Lavush for the reason for this, and the Dirshu footnote brings it down, footnote number 15, Shekasav Shekala Kadeshim Shenimnu Kan Heim Choiva, because the other seven Kadeshim that we list are all Chiyuv. Aval Tfilah Shemona Esrei Shal Arvis Im HaKadosh Achareh Heim Rishus, but we know that really we paskin that the Shemona Esrei of Ma'ariv, Tfilas Ma'ariv technically is a Rishus, not a Chiyuv. And therefore the Kaddish that follows it is also a Rishus, not a Chiyuv. Okay, now we go to Sif Beis, top line here in the Mechaber. Says the Mechaber. Im hischil loimer Kaddish oy kedusha ba'asara. Let's say you had a minyan. You had 10 people. So the Chazan started saying Kaddish. Let's pick the Kaddish after Yishtabach. We had 10 people. We had a minyan. So the shots, finishes off Yishtabach. And now somebody walks out. And now suddenly there's no minyan anymore. You only have 9. Says the Mechaber, if you started saying Kaddish, or you started saying Kedusha in Chazar Sashatz, or the Mishnah Berurah is going to say, you didn't yet get up to Kedusha. You didn't start saying Kedusha of Chazar Sashatz, but you started Chazar Sashatz. So you started Chazar Sashatz, says the Mechaber, v'yotzu miktasan. Now some of the minyan went out. Goimrim oisai HaKaddish, oisai HaKedusha shehischil. You could finish the Kaddish that you started. You could finish the Kedusha that you started. We're going to see in the Mishnah Berurah, you could finish the entire Chazar Sashatz that you started. V'hu shenishtayru ruban. As long as a roiv of the minyan is still there. If 6 people remain, you could finish off the section that you started. And this will become more apparent and will be explained in the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Vav. Im hischil. In the case of the Mechaber is, you started a Kaddish. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'hu adin b'chol davar shetzarech hasara. This is the halacha that applies to anything that requires a minyan. Kigayin nesias kapayim. Let's say it's Yom Tov, and it's the middle of Musaf, and the Kaihanim went up to Duchen. In order to Duchen, you need a minyan. So the Kaihanim went up to Duchen, and they started. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kidushanu b'kedushasai shel ha'aron. So they started in the Siyas Kapayim, and now the minyan walked out. Now you only have 7 people. So you started in the Siyas Kapayim, you could finish the Siyas Kapayim. Ukriyas HaTorah. Let's say you started laning, right? And now 2 people walked out. You only have 8 people in the shul. What do? You stop laning? No. You continue the entire Kriyas HaTorah, not the Navi, not the HaTorah. You go till the end, but you don't. The laning is one section. You finish the Davar Shebekdusha that you started. You started the Davar Shebekdusha that needs 10, and you lost the minyan. You finished that Davar Shebekdusha. The Navi, the HaTorah, is a separate Davar Shebekdusha. Like the Mishnah Berurah says, V'hu adin b'chol davar shetzarech hasara. Kigar nesiyas kapayim, ukriyas HaTorah, v'HaTorah b'Navi. If you started the HaTorah and you had 10, then you could finish the HaTorah, even if 2 walked out. It doesn't matter, you could finish. Goimrin kol ma sheshayich le'inyan zeh. Whatever is part of the Davar Shebekdusha that you already started with a minyan, that you could finish even without a minyan. Since you started that Davar Shebekdusha with 10. But you can't go on to start the next thing. So you started Chazar Sashatz You could finish Chazaras Hashatz. You could have Kedusha. We're even going to see, you could say Ashrei Volotzian and say Kaddish Teskabel after Volotzian. Because again, we said that Kaddish Shalom is Shaykh Nishman Esrei. So you started Chazaras Hashatz with a minyan, you could go all the way through to the Kaddish Shalom after Volotzian, even if you lost the minyan. But let's say you started the Chatzi Kaddish after Yishtabach with a minyan, and then you lost the minyan. Okay, you could finish the Kaddish, you could say Baruch Hu, and then you'll say Berachas Kriya Shema, and you'll say Shemona Esrei, but you can't start Chazaras Hashatz. You don't have a minyan to start Chazaras Hashatz, and that's already a different section. Ois Katan Zayin, Loimar Kaddish, V'im Hiska Loimar Yishtabach Ba'asara V'yotzu Miktsasan. Let's say you started saying Yishtabach. So the Shlech Tzibur went up to the Amud, Yishtabach Shemcha Lad Malkeinu. And now somebody walked out. V'cheinim Hiska Loimar Ashrei Shekaidim Mincha. Or let's say you said Ashrei before Mincha Ba'asara with 10. V'yotzu Miktsasan and some went out. So over here, see, the case that I gave you right before was the Shlech Tzibur of Shachris started saying Kaddish. He had a minyan when he started saying Kaddish after Yishtabach. So he started the Davar Shebikdusha. Kaddish is the Davar Shebikdusha. So you started the Davar Shebikdusha with a minyan. Now you could finish all of the Dvarim Shebikdusha that are shaykh to that inyan. So you could finish the Kaddish, you could say Baruch Hu. But over here, he didn't start saying Kaddish with a minyan. He started saying Yishtabach with a minyan. But by the time he finished Yishtabach, before he started saying Kaddish, he lost the minyan. Or by Ashrei, it's one thing if you started Ashrei and you started Chatzi Kaddish after Ashrei with the minyan. If you started Chatzi Kaddish after Ashrei with the minyan, so okay, so now you'll daven Shemona Esrei. I think we'll see that you could even do Chazaras Hashatz and Kedusha and Kaddish Shalom. But how about if you just started Ashrei? That's all you got to. You got to Ashrei. If all you did was Ashrei, could you now say Chatzi Kaddish after Ashrei? If all you did was Yishtabach, could you say Chatzi Kaddish and Baruch Hu after Yishtabach? So on that, the Mishnah Berurah says, Mistapek, Hapri Megadim, the Ula Yucha Loimer HaKaddish HaKazeh, Ki HaKaddish Shayich Li Yishtabach VaAshrei. Says, could be that's called already starting the Davar Shebikdusha because the Kaddish is going back on the Yishtabach. And the Kaddish after Ashrei is going back on the Ashrei. V'ayin b'shari tshuva b'shem el Yerabah amnam b'sefer Marmar Mordechai v'derech HaChaim v'chayodam kulam pasku d'lo yuchal loimer HaKaddish bazeh. And the reason is, you see again, I want to show you how it's comparable and why we paskin that it's not. If you started Chazaras Hashatz with a minyan, and then you lost the minyan, you could say Kedusha, you could say Ashrei Volotzian, and you could say Kaddish Shalom Teskabel after Volotzian with a minyan. Why? Because the Kaddish Shalom of Teskabel after Volotzian is connected to Chazaras Hashatz. And Chazaras Hashatz, you started with 10. You started it with a minyan. So you could finish that whole inyan with a minyan. Therefore, the Pri Megadim is Besupik. Maybe if you start Yishtabach with a minyan, or if you start Ashrei with a minyan, we know that the Chatzi Kaddish after Yishtabach and the Chatzi Kaddish after Ashrei are connected to Ashrei and connected to Yishtabach. So maybe that's called you already started the Davar Shebikdusha, you could finish. On the other hand, the Chayodam and these other Paiskim that you cannot. And the reason is because it's hard to say that by starting Ashrei with a minyan or starting Yishtabach with a minyan, you started the Davar Shebikdusha with a minyan. You know why? Because you could say Ashrei without a minyan. And you could say Yishtabach without a minyan. So you didn't start something that requires a minyan. You started with something that doesn't require a minyan. So that's not called you started the Davar Shebikdusha that needs a minyan with a minyan that you should be able to finish. Ois Katneches. The words of the Mechaber were, Im Hiskel Loimer Kaddish Oy Kedusha. So the two cases that the Mechaber said were, you started saying Kaddish with a minyan, and then you lost the minyan, or you started saying Kedusha. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Lav Dafka. This is a little bit imprecise, the wording of the Mechaber. Dehu adin afil rak ba'avos. You don't have to actually start Kedusha. You just have to start Chazaras HaShatz. As long as you start Chazaras HaShatz with a minyan, the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, so the first bracha of Chazaras HaShatz is Avos, the bracha of Avos. Magen, right? Magen Avram is called Avos. So if you started Chazaras HaShatz with a minyan, then you could finish, you could do Kedusha, you could finish the whole Chazaras HaShatz, Uchidl Kamei b'Sif Gimel, like we're going to say soon in Sif Gimel. The Efsher the knockout Revusa de Seifa. Maybe the Mechaber wrote it this way because it shows a Chiddush in the Seifa, in the end, what we're going to say. Even though you started, but this is only true if Roiv of the minyan, if you have 6. It's only true if you have 6, and that's even if you already started Kedusha. If we're talking about the Kaddish that's after Yishtabach before Baruch Hu, you started that Kaddish with a minyan. You could say Baruch Hu, the Kulachada in Yanuhu. Ice cotton Yud HaKedusha. The Mechaber said you could finish Kedusha. Says the Chavetz Chaim, it's not only Kedusha that you could finish. V'hoadin kol tefillah Shemona Esrei, you could finish the entire Chazaras HaShatz. Ulefi ma'ashem avur ba'hagasha b'Sif Gimel gomer gam ha'chatzi kaddish v'kaddish shalom shalachareh. If you started Chazaras HaShatz with a minyan, you could do Kedusha, you could do Chazaras HaShatz, you could do Chatzi Kaddish after Tachdon, and you could do Kaddish Shalom Teskabel after Revolution, because it's all one Inyan. The Kasra Achrayim, the Achrayim, you're right. The Yarma Gam Kain Bracha Delikenu Barchena Bar Bracha Shuleshes. You started Chazaras HaShatz with a minyan, and then you lost the minyan. You could say Berchas Kayhanim in that Chazaras HaShatz that you're finishing without a minyan. The Chol Shehiskel B'Tfilah Shemona Esrei Goimra. Because once you started the Shemona Esrei Chazaras HaShatz, you could finish it with everything that's a part of it. Afal Gav de Tanan, even though we learned in the Mishnah B'Sechtas Megillah, Ein Noisin Kapayim B'Pachas Ma'asara, that you can't do Birchas Kehana without 10, and when you say Elokeinu v'Elokeinu V'Seinu B'Archeinu B'Bracham Shaleshes Matarek Tzivay Demesh Avdeka, that's Birchas Kehanim. Va'afilu Im Hiskel Atfilu Ba'asara. And even if you started Shemona Esrei with 10, so this means you can't actually duchen. See, if it's Yom Tov, if you started the Musaf Chazaras HaShatz on Yom Tov with the minyan, and then you lost the minyan, you cannot duchen. But Elokeinu v'Elokeinu V'Seinu you could do. That's only a real duchening. Because duchening is considered separate from the Chazaras HaShatz. But that you could do with a minyan. Now the Mechaber said that this halacha is true ruban, as long as roiv of the minyan is still there. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ruban, Hainu Shisha. That means 6. Now, why does the Mishnah Berurah have to go out of his way to tell us that roiv of 10 is 6? So you'll see here why. V'loi be'inon Ruban de minkar. You don't need an instantly recognizable roiv. That would be 7. 7 is considered a roiv de minkar of 10. Says the Mishnah Berurah, you don't need a Ruban de minkar. You just need a straight roiv, which is 6. Okay, now we go weiter in the Mechaber here in Sif Beis. We go with the Ramah. 3 lines down near the beginning of the line, Hagah, says the Ramah. Even though this halacha is true, that if you started a Davar Shebikdusha with a minyan, you could finish that Davar Shebikdusha even if you lose the minyan, still in all, says the Ramah, Umikal Makayim, Aveira hi Lotzes. It is an Aveira for anybody to leave and break the minyan. So somebody should not say, he got a phone call. He wants to head out now. What's the difference? The halacha is that they could finish the Davar Shebikdusha without me. No, it's still an Aveira to leave. Va'aleim nemar. And about people who leave, when they're going to break a minyan, the pasuk in Yeshaya says, Va'oizvei Hashem yichlu. Those who forsake the Rebbeinu Shalom will be destroyed. Avalim nisharu asara, but if there will be 10, mutalatzes, then technically you're allowed to leave. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Ice cut in Yud Beis. Averahi, it's an avera to leave. Nirali sheritzayna loymar im einay mamtin ad sheyigmaru oisay ha'inyan. When the Ramah says that it's an avera to leave, he means if you're the 10th man of the minyan, then you cannot leave before that piece of davening is over. But if you wait till the end of that section of davening, that's enough. Kigoin, for example, says the Chofetz Chaim, let's say you are in the shul, you davened by the 7 o'clock minyan. Now it's time for the 8 o'clock minyan. You started with the 7 o'clock minyan, the 7 o'clock minyan finished, you put on your Rabbeinu Tam tefillin, you chazed yesterday's daf. Meantime, the 8 o'clock minyan started, and the 8 o'clock minyan is up to Yishtabach, and they want to go ahead, they want to say Yishtabach, Chatzi Kaddish, and Baruch Hu. But they don't have a minyan. They have 9. So they ask you to stick around to be number 10. So you stuck around to be number 10 for what? You stuck around for Kaddish and for Baruch Hu. Says the Mishnah Berurah, if you stuck around to join another 9 for Kaddish and for Baruch Hu, you're not now mechuyev to stay there and wait to make sure that they have a minyan for Chazar Hashatz. You stayed for Chatzi Kaddish and for Baruch Hu before Birchas Kriyashma. Now you're entitled to leave. You don't have to eat up your whole day waiting over here to provide these people with a minyan. You're not mechuyev to do that. You have to stay for the piece that you stayed for. But after that, you could go. Shuid Yanacher. If you were there and you were mitzaref to the minyan when Chazar Hashat started, you always have to wait to the end of the section that you stayed for. So if you stayed to be a minyan to let them start Chazar Hashatz and hear Kedusha, now you have to stay until after Kaddish Tiskabel, after Uval Tzion, because that's all one section. Okay, Ice Cotton Yud Gimel, the Ramah said, if there'll be 10 without you, mutter lotzeis, avalim nisharu, ayin bebir halacha, he sends you to the bir halacha, who discusses this in greater detail. Ice Cotton Yudalin mutter lotzeis, v'hu shekvar shamu kedusha v'akadisham adalenu. When we say that if there's going to be 10 people left, it's mutter for you to leave. Well, wait a second. Remember that you have a chiyuv to hear 7 kadeshim and to hear kedusha. So when we say that it's mutter for you to leave if there's going to be a minyan, that's only if you're being mekayim your chiyuv of kadeshim and kedusha in another way. Okay, now we go to Siv Gimel. Says the Mechaber, Im hiskil ba'avos v'yatzu miktasam. If you started Chazar Hashatz with a minyan, and then some left, Gomer afilu kedusha. You could say Chazar Hashatz, and you could even say kedusha. Says the Mishnah Berurah Cotton Tezvav, afilu kedusha, for who adin the Gomer Shnei Tzibur called Tfilah Shmoneh Esrei. Indeed, you could do the entire Chazar Hashatz, and Ashrei Uval Tzion, and Kaddish Tiskabel. The only reason the Mechaber goes out of his way to tell you this halacha, that if you started Chazar Hashatz, you could finish Kedusha, that's because you might think that Chazar Hashatz and Kedusha are two separate inyanim. Who says I can do Kedusha? I started Chazar Hashatz with a minyan. Who says that allows me to do Kedusha? Kamash Malon, that it does, because it's considered one inyan with Chazar Hashatz. Excuse me. It says the Ramah, 3 lines off the bottom. Hago. Let's say you lost the minyan in middle of Birchas Kriyashma. Lehispalel yoitzer means to daven the Birchas Kriyashma. Yoitzer arav arachosha. So you lost some of your minyan, and now you no longer have a minyan. And when did you lose the minyan? After you started Birchas Kriyashma. Says the Mishnah Berurah, in that case, says the Mechaber, in that case, lo yaschel ashleach tzibur lehispal latfila b'kol ram. If you did Chatzi Kaddish and Baruch Hu, and you had a minyan, and then you went into Birchas Kriyashma, and you had a minyan, But in middle of Birchas Kriya Shema, you lost your minyan. All right, so you'll finish Birchas Kriya Shema, you'll daven Shemoneh Esrei, but now you cannot start. Chazaras Hashatz, because Chazaras Hashatz is already in the next section. That's what the Mishnah Berurah says here. That's what the Ramah says here. If you lost part of your minyan in the middle of Birchas Kriya Shema, lo yaschel hashleach tzibur lehispal atfilah b'kol ram. The chazan cannot start Chazaras Hashatz. The kvar nishlam tfilas yotzer, because the Birchas Kriya Shema section of davening is over. Now with Chazaras Hashatz, you're going into the next section of davening. If you don't have a minyan to start that, you can't start it. But if the people went out after you already started Chazaras Hashatz, you could do Chazaras Hashatz and Kedusha and Ashrei V'Otzion, that's Seder Kedusha. For Loimer Kaddish Shalom Shalach Hared, you could say Kaddish Shalom to Skabal after V'Otzion. The Shayach L'Tfilah, because that's connected to Tfilah Shemoneh Esrei. So if you had a minyan for Shemoneh Esrei, so then you could do all of this. If you had a minyan of Chazaras Hashatz, this is all connected to Chazaras Hashatz. The Shayach L'Tfilah. Sha'arei Omer to Skabal Tzloisan. Again, I want to be very clear. What the Ramah is saying is, if you started Chazaras Hashatz with a minyan, you could finish Chazaras Hashatz with Kedusha, with Berachas Kaihanim, not Duchening if you're in Eretz Yisrael, but you could say Chatzi Kaddish after Shemoneh Esrei, after Tachlin, and you could say Kaddish Shalom Teskabel after Uvolotzion. That's all if you started Chazaras Hashatz with a minyan. How about if you started the Shtila Shemoneh Esrei with a minyan? That we'll see. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Tezayin, La'achar Shehizchilu, Nakat Hailishta La'afukim Imahara Shehuva B'Darkei Moshe Sheroitz Al Hakal Bazeh. I'm not sure what that means. Avo be'emes lefi askamas ha'paiskim hu afilu ha'matfilu b'lacha shoyegam kein ba'asar. He says over here, this is the Shiloh we were just talking about here. The Mishnah Berurah says, be'emes lefi askamas ha'paiskim, according to the conclusion and the agreement of the paiskim, hu afilu ha'matfilu b'lacha shoyegam kein ba'asar. If you said the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei with a tzibur, you didn't start Chazaras Hashatz with a minyan. By the time you wanted to start Chazaras Hashatz, you lost the minyan. But you davened the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei with the minyan. Again, Avo be'emes lefi haskamas ha'paiskim, hu afilu matfilu b'lacha shoyegam kein ba'asara. If it is Shtil Shemoneh Esrei, you had 10. Dinu shelo yaskel. I'm sorry, the other way. I'm sorry. Sorry, I made a toyas. It's the other way. We're being machmir. We're not being makel. We're being machmir. Be'emes lefi haskamas ha'paiskim hu afilu matfilu b'lacha shoyegam kein ba'asara. If you davened the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei with the minyan, and now you finished the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei and you do not have a minyan, dinuhu shelo yaschil hashleach tzibur b'karam b'pachas ma'asara. You cannot start Chazaras Hashatz if you don't have 10. So if you started Chazaras Hashatz, see, the Ramah said, Im yotzu miktsasa la'achar sheheschilu lehispalel yoitzer. If you lost your minyan in the middle of Birchas Kriya Shema, then the Shleach Tzibur cannot do Chazaras Hashatz. Now the Mishnah Berurah is going, and the Mishnah Berurah is being more machmir. He's saying it's not only if you lost your minyan during Birchas Kriya Shema. That sounds like if you lost the minyan during Birchas Kriya Shema, then you can't do Chazaras Hashatz without a minyan. But let's say you didn't lose the minyan during Birchas Kriya Shema. You had the minyan for the whole Birchas Kriya Shema, and you had the minyan for the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei. From the Ramah, it sounds like, once you started the Shtil Shemoneh Esrei with a minyan, you could do Chazaras Hashatz and Kedusha and everything else. And I think that's what the Mishnah Berurah is bringing down from the Maharash. Shehuva b'darkei Moshe sheroitz al hakel. He's being makel. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, we're being machmir. What's the chumrah? You didn't lose the minyan by Birchas Kriya Shema. You lost the minyan after the Shtil Shmona Esrei. You cannot start Chazaras Hashatz if you don't have 10. So Shmona Esrei is not considered the beginning of the Davar Shebekdusha of Chazaras Hashatz and Kedusha. That's separate. It's almost as if the Tefillah Balachash, the Shtil Shmona Esrei, is more part of Birchas Kriya Shema. Then a new section starts with Chazaras Hashatz and Kedusha. But you can't start Chazaras Hashatz unless you have a minyan to start Chazaras Hashatz with. Aiskan Yodzayin, Lachar Sheskilu Lehispalel Yoitzer, Ayin Bachreinim Sheskimu, Da Afilu Lo Yomru Rak Kadishu Baruch Hu Ba'asara. If you said Chatzi Kaddish after Yishtabach and Baruch Hu with 10, V'yatzu Mikzasan Kainim Sheskilu Klal Birchas Yoitzer, and now you lost your minyan before you started Birchas Kriya Shema, Mikri K'may Sheskilu Kvar Ba'asara, V'yichaylu Lahitzi Acherem Ad Shmona Esrei Afilu B'pachas Me'asar. Birchas Kriya Shema is already covered with a minyan. And then the Ramah said, if you started Chazaras Hashatz with a minyan, you could do Chazaras Hashatz and Kedusha and Tachdon and Chatzi Kaddish and Asher Voltzion and Kaddish Shalom with Tiskabel. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Kedusha lav dafka, dafilu adayin lo yamru Kedusha. Doesn't mean that you have to start the Kedusha. As long as you started Chazaras Hashatz with a minyan. V'afilu rak b'avis lavad, goymer mafakadish shalom. Ais cut your test, hakadish shalom, v'chol shked hachatzi kaddish hachatzilu shmona esrei. Kavachomer, the chatzi kaddish after tachlin you could do. Ais cut nechaf, shala acharel, you could do the kaddish shalom tiskabel after Shmona Esrei without a minyan, as long as you started Chazaras Hashatz with a minyan. Aval Kaddish Achar Aleinu, but Kaddish Yosem after Aleinu, Lo Yomer Bazeh, that you can't say because that's already a different inyan. Va'afilu im Hischa Loimer Aleinu Ba'asara, even if you had a minyan when Aleinu started, the Yotzu Mikzasan, and you lost the minyan in the middle of Aleinu, Gam Ke Lo Yomer HaKaddish, you can't say Kaddish after Aleinu, De'enei Ela Minig, because that Kaddish is only a minig. Certainly any of these other Kaddish after the Yom or Kaddish after limud, after or Chadana ben Akashia Omer, you have to have a minyan. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. We're going to stop over here. Very complex halachas, but in a nutshell, what we're saying is that if you start a davar shebekdusha with 10, you could finish that davar shebekdusha and everything that's considered part of that davar shebekdusha, even if you lost the minyan after you started. Okay, be well.